My wife was, her gut said, hey, something doesn't seem right about this. So she got online, she did a lot of research. She couldn't find anything online, and there was a lot of pressure in where she was working. So she took the COVID shot. She's perfectly healthy, perfectly fine, and within the first 12 hours started having tingling into her face within 48 hours in the emergency room in the hospital, and seeing neurologists, checking to see if she had MS. And so it's like, there's no doubt.
Welcome to the Alix Mayer Show. I am so excited for today's guest. It's Ken Ruettgers of the Green Bay Packers fame. He's a Hall of Famer, but he is so much more. He learned how to pick up a football and carry it down the field when he was a professional football player, but he's still doing that today. When he saw there was something wrong with the COVID narrative, he did something. And you're also going to understand why he says to steal the bike. Thanks so much for tuning in. Please like and subscribe. And I want to hear from you after the show. What do you think of this episode? What questions should I be asking our guests that you want to know? The Alix Mayer Show is sponsored by Mish International, gold and silver specialists since 1963. When you need protection from monetary inflation and leveraged assets exposure, you contact the dedicated people at Mish International. Mish International, a family business, offers true expertise, integrity, reliability, and fair pricing of gold and silver. Visit their website at mishinternational.com. That's MISH international.com. Ken Ruettgers, welcome to the Alix Mayer Show. I've been so looking forward to interviewing you today. I can't even tell you. And I've done a little bit of research on you, and I found out a few things that I didn't know about you that are really exciting. So welcome.
Well, it's great to be here with you, Alix. I'm excited for you, for the show, for all the things that you bring to the movement, to society. It's great to be here with you.
You were a football star in high school, and that got you noticed by the Green Bay Packers. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I my mom passed away when I was 8. She had brain cancer, and I was kind of going sideways, and my dad really encouraged me to go, get into football, and I absolutely flourished in that, loved it, and had a great high school career, and got a scholarship at USC, and then was a first-round draft pick by the Packers. I played for the Packers for 12 years, and Southern California. I grew up in Bakersfield. A Southern California guy going to Wisconsin to play pro football in the NFL was a bit of a challenge. And gosh, I look back, on my first 7 years. And we only had one winning season in my first 7 years in northern Wisconsin, which was cold as heck. So it was challenging. And then we got new coaches, new general manager, and we started winning. And my last year, we won the Super Bowl against the New England Patriots. So a fun career and challenging.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible to go from where you were to winning the Super Bowl. And that was 1996 that you won the Super Bowl?
The 96 season, 97 Super Bowl, Super Bowl 31.
That's incredible. And the name of the team, the Packers, I've always known that it was named after a meat packing sponsor, which is kind of a connection between you and me because I grew up in a meat packing family, which had their headquarters in Wisconsin. So did that ever come up, the fact that your original sponsor was a meat packer?
Oh, every once in a while, we kind of make fun of it. But what's great about the Green Bay Packers is the team is owned by shareholders, by the public, and it's not a tradable stock that kicks money or interest, or it's just like you put in $25 donation to the Statue of Liberty and they give you a little coin, so you get a little stock certificate. And of course, the people of Wisconsin own the Green Bay Packers, and so playing for the Packers, I'm working for the people. It's awesome.
That's really cool. So you won a ton of awards in your football career that are really impressive. Do you want to just go through a few of those?
Oh, well, I always joke about, I think I was offensive MVP my senior year at USC, and also offensive MVP in Green Bay one year, which I think that may say more about the team and the offense than it does about about me. If you're awarding an offensive lineman an MVP, then your offensive unit in your team is not be all that good. But, being inducted into the Green Bay Packer Hall of Fame was a great honor and a great privilege, and was fun to share with family and my kids. And yeah, it was great.
That's awesome. You took some turns after you left the Packers. And you mentioned something about a teammate getting into a little bit of trouble. And we talked about how your ability to just pick up a football when nobody else is picking it up is kind of seems to be a theme of your life. Can you talk about what you did at that point and what happened with that teammate?
Yeah, I was retired in Wisconsin, and trying to help my wife. My new job was helping my wife be a more efficient housewife and mother, and that really wasn't working out too well, Alex. And so took a job with a publishing company, and I'd written a book, Home Field Advantage, that encourages dads that they can be the greatest influence and impact in their own kids' lives, that they don't need to be a Reggie White or a Michael Jordan to have the greatest impact on their own kids. And was working for that publishing company. And I had a teammate, a guy I played next to on the offensive line, that ended up in a SWAT standoff, was unarmed, and was shot 8 times and killed in Fresno, California. And so a bunch of us offensive linemen, we got on the phone, we started talking, and guys started sharing about what a challenge their transitions were. And I thought, and it resonated with me. And I thought, gosh, I'm not the only one that is dealing with these transitions and the challenges. And mostly it's identity, leaving that athletic identity and moving into who am I now and what's the meaning and purpose in my life. And so I tried to encourage the players union and the NFL to pick that ball up, and couldn't get anybody excited about that. So I said, well, I'll do it, and I'll start it as a nonprofit and see where it went. I did that for about 10 years. And then one of the guys I helped early on, he ended up being tapped by the league, and the league started a program for transition. The NFL did about 10 or 11 years ago. And so he asked me to join him and help get that program going. And so now I do some part-time work for the NFL as a transition coach. And so glad the NFL picked that up.
Wow, that's the best compliment ever that you started and it turns out to just be a pilot and then rolled out across the United States. That's incredible. That's a great legacy, one of many that you've left.
Yeah, well, it was Troy Vincent, who was a former player and a VP level at the league office, and kind of his baby at the league office. But I'm just glad that they had the resources. I mean, the NFL's packed with resources, and doing it as a nonprofit, as a single person it was a tough go. But it's nice to be part of the league and the resources they have to help guys with their transition, to help them do greater things beyond the game than they ever imagined doing in the game.
What are the biggest issues with the transition coming out of the NFL? You've got a lot of money and no purpose.
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, what great insight. Yeah. So I think in the past, like decades ago, when guys in the NFL were making what a teacher, fifth grade teacher, was making, it was a pretty easy transition, and they knew going in, when I'm done, I'm going to have to get a job. And now you have players, the minimum wage in the NFL now is $1 million a year. That's minimum wage. I know. And so I'm working with guys that come out with, the average career length's about 3.5 years, and you got to pay taxes and some cost of living. But I got guys, that we work with that come out now, and to your point, they come out with a pretty good nest egg of money and trying to figure out what's next in life. And most of them have to leave the game not on their own terms. And so that transition comes with a lot of grieving and maybe some depression and some challenges relationally, because once that transition happens, then relationally, your relationships change as well.
So interesting. So you're there to pick up these men as they're coming back out into society after being, in the public eye with football. Wow. And you're still doing that work today.
Yeah, I do that kind of a part. There's 8 of us, and we do it part-time, all former players. And we get about a dozen guys a year that we kind of help through that process.
That's incredible. So, and that led you to then get a PhD in sociology. Is that right?
Yeah, so I had, like you, I have my master's in business, my MBA, kind of a business person, and was trying to figure out what can help these guys in their transition. And so I did a doctoral dissertation, a formal dissertation on perceived barriers to sport career transition of newly retired NFL athletes. And what I found, I was hoping to find, this magic pill or silver bullet or whatever. What I found is that transition's just really hard. And to be able to have the support in guys that have played and been there before and gone through it, I think has been very beneficial for players. But yeah, so I got my PhD and then kind of got burnt out on the nonprofit after about 10 years. So I teach at the college level, a community college in Central Oregon, part-time as well.
That's wonderful. So we need to call you Dr. Ruettgers.
No, you can call me Ken. And you know what? And I coached high school football and track, football for about 15 years at the high school level. And so, yeah, sometimes they call me coach. So, which is a great title, because just teaching young men, helping them develop their adult skills is a lot of fun. A great challenge, and it was great.
I think coaches and mentors are two of the most important roles, especially for men, that you can play as an adult, because there's a lot of young men coming up who really need that guidance, and they might not have their parents to do that. Not that they aren't loving, but maybe their parents weren't in the NFL. Maybe they don't have the same life experiences. And so it's guys like you who step in and fill that role. And as I said earlier, you learned something about just picking up a football and running it down the field. If nobody else is touching it, you're there. You see a need and you fill it.
Yeah, I think you talk to professional athletes, and I mostly in football, and you ask them, what was your who was the greatest influence in your life? And for a lot of guys, it was their high school coach that had the greatest impact and influence on their life. They're at a season of life where, like you mentioned, that mentor, that male role model is so important. And a lot of times these guys don't have father figures and male role models in their homes. So it was very, very important role in development of these young men.
It's a beautiful thing you're doing. Well, that takes us to the big topic here, which is medical freedom. And tell me, before 2020, did you even think about medical freedom issues? Was that on your radar?
We had a daughter that was about a 6-week preemie, and they gave her her first set of shots at about six weeks, which was about full term, had she been full term, and had an immediate reaction. Had to have a spinal tap through her top of her head, and then had to have a plasma transfusion. Probably saved her life, but she had a reaction to the pertussis shot, and lucky to have her alive still today. That's when we hopped on Children's Health Defense and started, and that was in the early 90s. And of course, I'm playing football and it's stressful, and our focus is that. And so we're kind of on the margins of being in that space. And then your kid stays healthy. And of course, I think it was years later, my wife finally said, I have to confess, I lied on the educational vaccine chart. I said, what? And she goes, well, I think, and that was after she'd gone all the way through most of K through 8. And she said, I just didn't want, if we were going to get caught and put in jail, I didn't want both of us to end up in jail. So that's why I didn't tell you sooner. But because something, in her biology or chemistry, I don't know. We're still got a lot of answers, as to seek and to find. But yeah, definitely had a reaction, and it wasn't worth going back there again for her. And of course, the data that we see today, the data is pretty clear and suggests you're far better off in the long run as a full total health outcome to not take vaccines. We were in California. It was during the off season. We'd go back to California in off season, and the pediatrician was absolutely, she knew right away what was going on and that it was the vaccine. But you know how it was and how it still is today. In a lot of pediatricians' offices, even when they know, they can't say because of the fear and the threat of losing their licenses or being reprimanded, or even the threat of having to appear before the licensing commission or board is such a deterrent for being honest and straightforward and doing what's best for your patient. It's, as you know, it's absolutely crazy. And you know what's interesting about that too, because uh, my mother-in-law, my wife's mom, she just recently was doing some work with some doctors, and on her behalf, we rejected the flu shot, and the doctor was, a bit taken back by that. But the nurses know. I'll tell you what, the nurses, they know. I think today, and this is my opinion, and from observation, is our whole medical industrial complex has become a patient, and not as people, but a patient as far as numbers and profit, and trying to become more efficient. And doctors, they see you for just a little bit, but it seems like the nurses have a greater care on a more personal level. And whether it's gender role socialization or some difference in general biology between men and women and how we interact or relate, maybe, and more nurses are women and more doctors tend to be men still today, and although that's shifting and changing, but I think that's part of it as well.
It is so true. And so yeah, because of this safe and effective mantra, we fast forward and we get to 2020, and everybody knows what happened in 2020. We had bat soup and COVID jumped out of it and got on all of us somehow. And we all, even with what we knew, a lot of us still got scared of COVID and went ahead and got the shot. So what was your headspace with you and Cheryl in 2020 regarding COVID and thinking about the vaccine coming out? Where were you?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't too worried about it because I had time, but she was doing an internship. She had most of her hours done, and so there was a lot of pressure in where she was working as a therapist, as a counselor, to be one of the first early takers. Everybody that was working with people and still not locked down, were asked, and of course, safe and effective. My wife was, her gut said, hey, something doesn't seem right about this. So she got online, she did a lot of research. And there was maybe Britt. Remember Britt? She was famous for the magnet in the arm, and that was about it, and that was kind of early on, that was kind of crazy talk, right? And so she couldn't find anything online, and that was a very difficult decision for her, but a lot of pressure coming from, hey, if you don't do this, you're in jeopardy of losing your hours and having to start all over again. And after all, it is safe and effective, right? And so she took the shot, the COVID shot, and within 24 hours started having tingling start in the back of her and went all to her scalp and then into her face within 48 hours, and in the emergency room in the hospital, and seeing neurologists, checking to see if she had MS, doing scans and imaging, and nobody had answers. I mean, it's like she's perfectly healthy, perfectly fine, and within the first 12 hours started getting that tingling. And so it's like there's no doubt. And she was very straightforward with the neurologist, and the first neurologist said, well, if you're, I'm going to treat you for MS, but if you're going to stick and hang on to this, it was the vaccine thing, then I'm not going to take full liability or responsibility. So she had to find another neurologist who, although he called it long COVID, eventually he knew it was a vaccine injury. Again, the pressure in the medical community is that strong.
So Ken, let's sit on that for a second. You both know cause and effect. 24 hours later, Cheryl starts getting symptoms after her COVID shot. She's got tingling in her neck. She's starting to have neurological problems. She thinks she's coming down with MS type symptoms, but the doctor said that he or she would not treat her if you guys kept associating the symptoms with COVID shots.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it was, I think it was less fear of violating the social norm and the potential sanctions that would result. I think she just was a true believer. And man, after going through COVID and all the vaccine injuries and how everything developed, it seems to me like a lot of the issue was you just had people that were such true believers in vaccines as this miracle cure. And of course, we've learned since that it wasn't safe, it wasn't effective, it didn't stop transmissions or save grandma. It just absolutely fell apart. And I think we're still recovering from that. But yeah, so she had to find another neurologist.
Wow. So let me sit on something else. As a doctor of sociology, why do you think people are such true believers?
Well, I think Robert F. Kennedy Jr. talks a lot about the Milgram study, where an actor in a white lab coat who's pretending to be a doctor or a scientist tells somebody, no, continue the experiment. And people, more than half the people would administer a full dose of lethal electricity into what they believe is their test subject. And so I think the authority, and we put such trust in people wearing white lab coats or with a MD doctor in front of their name, and then you have Ash's group conformity. And so and boy, did we have a lot of group conformity. And if you violate the norms, yeah, I mean, if you weren't wearing a mask, if you were standing too close to somebody, if you weren't towing the line, if you even spoke out or questioned, hey, maybe this is not working out. I'm starting to see some things. Or, yeah, it was crazy. I mean, I tell friends, yeah, my wife got the shot, she's injured, and don't take that. I mean, I had family members, and I would say, don't take that. They saw what was happening to her, and they still went ahead. And I have a family member who's on his like 8th or 9th COVID shot. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I mean, you talk about cognitive dissonance.
Well, I think that's an ingredient in some vaccines is cognitive dissonance. It just gets injected into us.
We're going to inject it into you.
Exactly. We know so many of our listeners understand the relationship between health freedom and our personal and economic freedoms. It's the same principle. If you're one of our audience who's concerned about inflation, paper asset crises, and ongoing monetary crises, you may have already started accumulating gold and silver or are considering doing so. There's no gold dealer we know who's better positioned to serve the freedom community than Mish International in Menlo Park, California. I'm one of the many happy customers who's purchased gold or silver in their showroom, or I've had it delivered through their secure courier service. They are true veterans who are honest, fair, and reliable, and so knowledgeable regarding all the choices of gold and silver bars and coins to help you choose the products that fit your goals and your worldview. The principal, Robert Mish, is world-renowned for his expertise in rare coins as well. Write down this number, 650-324-9110. That's 650-324-9110. And visit mishinternational.com. That's MISH international.com to learn more about this notable company. So what happened with Cheryl's symptoms at that time? So you've obviously found a new medical doctor to take care of her. Did she get worse? I read that she was paralyzed and she really went through it.
Well, she developed small fiber neuropathy that eventually started, started up in her scalp and head and neck, but then started in her feet and just consumed her whole body. And I think looking at it from this vantage point, I think it really did a number on her immune system. And people, I think, have come to realize, yeah, really, the COVID, that new technology really puts a hit on your immune system. And I think that also activated a dormant Lyme disease that she has. So trying to fight and figure out, is it Lyme? Is it not? Is it the shot? Is it, is my body still? And she did some tests. Gosh, a year and a half, 2 years later, her body, I don't know if it's still producing it, but the level of spike protein in her body was incredibly high. And so I don't know, we're still, I guess, trying to figure out what's going on and why are their bodies still producing spike protein? Is it leftover and their bodies can't shed the spike protein? All the above. So yeah, we're still trying to figure it out. And I think the biggest help to her, because she's got an autoimmune disease, it's developed into an autoimmune disease. And so stress, histamines, create that inflammation, and that just sends her body, she can just tank into a real tough spot physically.
Oh, my heart aches for her. I've been through that, as you know, for 30 years now, and it does get better. You learn as you go. You learn the different ways to manage it, and you can kind of like chunk off pieces of it bit by bit. But it's like month by month by month. And yeah, I know about those histamine issues because I live those too, and they're brutal. And there's so many other cofactors with it. And I also want to say about the Lyme disease thing. I used to be a health consultant. Back in the 20 teens. And people would come to me with a Lyme disease diagnosis. And literally, Ken, half the time I would look at their labs and I would see a pattern of perhaps vaccine injury. But then the last thing I would ask them for is I said, give me your vaccine card right now. I want to see the timing of those vaccines. And I'm telling you, more than half the time, not every time, but more than half the time, people who thought they had Lyme disease actually were vaccine injured because their symptoms started after a vaccine, and usually an aluminum containing vaccine. And now these days it would probably be, a COVID mRNA vaccine also. But there's just this whole clinical mess that the poor patients have to sort through almost on their own, right? Like she's got to take the reins, right?
Yeah, I mean, just trying to, like you said, figure it out. And then you have, and as you know, because you've been in this space for years now, the suggestions of cures, dandelion or licorice or nicotine, and then you get into the more sophisticated SOT, plasma. I mean, all kinds of different treatments, and there are so many that you can't do them all. And even if you have a group, because early on, her neurologist, they didn't have answers. So she got on and started searching for vaccine injuries. And she found, ironically, she found, I think it was Neurology Today, had an article, and it was, and in the article, Fauci was quoted as saying, there is no neurological negative effects of the COVID shot. And here she is suffering from a neurological effect. And at the very bottom of the article, she went down to see, had anybody, and she started looking for, has anybody responded to these articles? Because the articles were saying, no problem, safe and effective. And what she found was she found a couple of people. She found one person in particular who was a medical doctor, Dr. Denise Hertz, who had commented, hey, I've been injured and have neurological, and she had accidentally put her email in. And so my wife contacted her, and eventually, because of that, because of Dr. Denise Hertz putting her email, a group of about 8 women, Denise, my wife, and Brianne Dressen, and some other ladies, all women, about 8 of them, started meeting on a regular basis, formed a Facebook page, group, and started talking. They're all looking for answers. The medical industry is still saying safe and effective. A lot of their doctors are telling them, oh, this is not neurological. This is not vaccine related. This is up in your and just gaslit the heck out of these ladies, which just really, was just lit me up. It's like, you got to be kidding me, because I know they knew, it was obvious as all get out what was going on, and nobody was willing to go there. And they were worried about, and Facebook groups started getting canceled, and they were concerned about that. And I think there were 3 of the 8 were medical doctors, and one was a nurse practitioner. They wrote a letter to the CDC and to the White House, got no response. We had some media, because we're trying to reach out to politicians, we're trying to reach out to media, and there's a little bit of interest, especially in media, but as soon as an editor, or the publisher got wind of it, they squashed it. So there was heavy censorship because it was going against the status quo.
It's unbelievable. There's so much to unpack there. The doctors, it is so shameful and unforgivable that if they can't figure it out or if it goes against their safe and effective narrative, that they blame it on the patient and think that there's a psych issue in all these patients. It's statistically impossible.
And and we're still trying to wrap our brains around this too, Alex, because most of all these women, they took the shot because they believed it was safe and effective. They believed what they were being told.
Right.
And the decades of that kind of socialization on our thinking and our belief systems, and it took a while to be, and anytime you talked about it or mentioned it, oh, you're crazy, oh, you're nuts, man, what are you thinking? It's safe and effective. I'm like, no, it's not. I mean, I know dozens of people, and the group went from, within a couple of weeks, went from 8 to hundreds to thousands, and then Facebook groups started getting cut and eliminated because our government, now we know our government put pressure on the social media platforms to censor.
Wow.
Which I still can't figure out, because there have been rulings in the past, as you know, where government, censors, other organizations censoring at government's behest is a violation of First Amendment.
That's right. Well, and actually led a protest at Facebook headquarters with Bobby Kennedy about their censorship and about that horrible letter that was an open letter from Adam Schiff to the social media companies to censor groups like Children's Health Defense and React 19, which is the group I think you're talking about, right? And that's the origin story of React 19, people. It started right here with Ken Ruettgers' wife, Cheryl, and Bree Dressen and medical doctors. It's really an incredible group that's still doing really incredible work, very cutting edge in the COVID shot injury world.
Yeah, including Dr. Joel Wolskog from Wisconsin. So he's an orthopedic doctor who ended up with a vaccine injury. But before React 19 started, I have a brother that does websites, and so this group was so fearful they were going to get canceled. I said, let me do a website for you. And at least in the United States, even though in England, I think they canceled a couple websites, the government and took them down. I think they eventually were put back up because of legal, action. But so I created a website, and people started putting in their stories. And then I started interviewing people and then editing down people's, and it was really interesting. And so we had the stories out there of people that were, so we were validating from lived experience. Of course, lived experience, if you don't like the outcome, it's a lie. They're actors. I had people say, oh, you're paying those people. I couldn't believe it. But, yeah, I called a regional conservative host, and trying to use my status as a former NFL player and a Super Bowl champ and I couldn't get any traction in the media. And then all of a sudden, it's like I'm like, you know what? There's this guy in Wisconsin. He's a senator. He seems like a really good guy. I mean, I've heard him in some sound bites on different news stations every once in a while. He's a Wisconsin guy. I'm going to just cold call. I'm just going to cold call his office. The receptionist answered the phone. I told her, who I was. I explained, my wife and what had happened. And I said, I don't know if this is in his wheelhouse or not. I don't know where he stands on this issue. But, I'm just out of desperation. This is like my last kind of Hail Mary pass. And she said, well, I'll pass that on to the senator.
Nobody would have guessed that. I assumed that because you're a famous Green Bay Packers Hall of Famer, that Senator Johnson was probably a Packers fan and you guys already knew each other because of that. But you literally cold called his office, and that's how that partnership started. That's amazing. And then that led to a big press conference in Milwaukee, right?
Yeah. So one of his aides, one of his staff members, called me back to validate, I really was who said I was, that I wasn't pretending. And then he said, well, the senator will call you back later this afternoon. He called me back. It was early June. And it brings tears to my eyes now just thinking about it, because there was nobody that had any power or status or clout that was willing to stand up for these injured ladies from these shots, these COVID shots. And he gets on the phone and he says, hey, tell me about your wife. So I started telling him about, and man, I'm sorry, Alex.
No, that's why we're here, and this is why we do this work, so people understand what a big deal it is when people like Senator Johnson and even like you take on this cause that people are trying to stomp out and act like it doesn't even exist, that our injuries do not exist, and that is absolutely not the case. So people like you and Senator Johnson.
Yeah, they were not seen, they were not heard, they were not believed, and now there's somebody who's willing to put their reputation and their status as either a media or for him, elected public servant, politician, senator. And he said, it was, I think, a Thursday. He said, hey, if you got all these people that you say, can you get them on Zoom on Sunday night? I said, yeah, absolutely. And so there ended up being about 60, mostly women, on the Zoom that were vaccine injured. And he and Dr. Peter McCullough, Senator Johnson brought Dr. McCullough, and we had about 8 to 10 people that started sharing their stories about their vaccine injuries. And even at that point in early June, Dr. McCullough was blown away at the extent and depth of the injuries. I mean, unbelievable. There were people that ended up being in wheelchairs or walkers because they lost the use of their legs, and the stories just continued. And I mean, McCullough was like, whoa, I've never heard, this is crazy. I mean, I've heard a little bit, but this is, and to Senator Johnson's credit, just by fate, he was already in that space. I didn't know it. And he thought I had called because he thought I knew he was in that space, but it was fate.
It sure was. It was meant to be. And there you are, picking up yet another football that nobody else was doing. And it led to this incredible partnership with Senator Johnson that started to educate him even more and allowed him access to all these people that he could tap for hearings. That was the next step that he took after you guys did the press conference. It's been really incredible.
Yeah, well, he said, hey, if you want, we could do a press conference. We'll do it in Milwaukee at a federal courthouse, because it has to be a federal space, because he's federal government, not state. And man, I tell you what, Brianne Dressen and I were operating the website and doing that together, and then working with trying to find my wife, and 3 others, so 5 ladies that held a press conference. I think it was the first press conference where you had like a panel and they just shared their story. And it was kind of crazy because the camera people, their eyes were tearing up, but the reporters, with the microphones or the laptops, for print media, they look at their watch and they're like, hey, when can we get home for dinner? And it was bizarre. In fact, I had one of the camera people came up to me afterwards and he said, hey, you know what? Thank you for doing this. You guys were awesome. Now I know I have a neighbor. I think they've been vaccine injured. I know it now that I've heard this. And so, but yeah, the reporters, they're doing their job. You're a number. You're a cog in the wheel, and that's what it felt like. And of course, Senator Johnson at the end, because he led it, he introduced us. The ladies shared their testimonies about what had happened, and then he said, "Hey, I'm going to leave, and I'm going to let you ask questions because the story is about them, not me. And if I stay here, it'll be about me." So he leaves, and I could not believe. They asked, "Who paid you all to be here? Are you doing this because you're filing a lawsuit?" And of course, we're answering no. I mean, everybody paid. to be here. There was one person that we pulled some money together, and because they could not afford to fly out. And no, we're not doing it. We're just here to tell our story, to bring truth and transparency and honesty into the public space.
Wait,
And then
Ken,
that was it.
they didn't ask about the injuries. They just asked who paid them to be there.
Yeah. And are you following the line? Yeah.
What is wrong with those people? Do you think that their publisher had already talked to them before they got there? Like, you're not going to run a story on vaccine injury. You're going to cover this, but you're going to say something about how they were paid to be there and they're going to file a lawsuit. So it's all BS. They just want money.
Well, if you believe that vaccines are safe and effective, and that's your cognitive dissonance belief, then it's not going to be true, the injuries. It's going to have to be some other reason or motive. And then Senator Johnson came back in the room, and boy, they went after him.
Really? What did they say to him?
Well, they're shooting arrows at him, and it was kind of funny because he said, "Hey, you guys are gonna have to take arrows. I mean, are you ready for this?" He said, "And Ken, you're the reason the media is willing to, at least because you have a status in Wisconsin, and the two of us, and then but it's about the ladies. Are you ready to take arrows?" And I was like, well. I said, Senator Johnson, giving up a couple sacks at the end of the game against the Vikings and having to answer questions, in the post-game press conference, I said that was hard. This, compared to that, is a little bit easier. But, once we took those arrows, and this is true for all the ladies that were there, once you take it is a bit nerve-wracking. It's like, what are the arrows I'm going to take, the names I want to be called, and then, the arrows come and they kind of bounce off you and you're like, really? Is that the best you got? Is that it? That's it? Is that all you got? And it's like, hey, at that point, it's like, that's, no big deal.
That was an incredible opportunity you created for all those women. And then, as you said, the people who identify with the injuries, the impact goes far beyond anything anybody could imagine because of that. So, well, God bless you for stepping up and helping make that happen. And you've still been involved with Senator Johnson and probably helping him get people to those hearings. And then you started a podcast with John Stockton. And so, just tell us a little bit about that. Like, what are you doing mostly these days? And how is Cheryl today?
She's, like you mentioned earlier about your own journey, she's doing better. She has her days, but she's learning how to manage that space. So she's doing better, and I think she's getting some healing. Our bodies, given the right environment and the right diet and low stress, our bodies want to heal, and so she's finding some of that for sure. So thanks for asking, Alex. So John and I met through Senator Johnson. Senator Johnson connected us. He knew John, I think, from just a past interaction. And John and I started talking, and about that same time, kind of toward the end of summer in 21, the NFL had been putting out, as well as all the other leagues, about mandatory shots, or at least that's how they labeled it. But if you didn't get the shot, then, and Aaron Rodgers is a great example of that, the quarterback for the Packers at the time, what they made the players go through was incredible. Being isolated more, taking multiple tests throughout the days, sometimes a different mode of transportation, being isolated in the locker room instead of with everybody. It was manufactured to put pressure, I think, on the players, and there was a lot of concern. But I think also John and I were getting calls from different parents of high school or from high school athletes, because colleges were also requiring vaccines, not only for athletes but students as well. It was, as you think back, and it was some crazy times of what the freedoms that we were losing. And John and I are both big freedom, people. We love freedom. We, give us a space and we'll take it and go with it. And as long as we have freedom, we'll figure it out.
That's right. So you were witnessing a lot of the stuff going on in the NFL through the eyes of current players and people who knew them, kind of medical discrimination, medical segregation. And I think there was also stuff like that happening at the community college where you teach, right? What was going on there?
Yeah, well, thankfully, our president kind of delayed and did a slowdown of the policies, but our college had put together a board of experts, college professors who, we're talking community college professors that were in biology and in human relations and psychology, and they recommended a policy. But it was absolutely crazy up here in Oregon because different schools had different policies. Some of the schools, they require the students to be vaccinated to stay enrolled, and some had teachers without students, and some had both. And then our school did initially, if you were a student in the nursing program, you had to, and a teacher in the nursing program, but nobody else. And then eventually, teachers, even though across town, the college, the four-year college there, teachers no, but students yes, had to be vaccinated. So it was really quite a mishmash. But it was, and the really interesting thing is our institution did not put in mandatory COVID shots until spring of 22, which it was by that time it was about over. And of course, and in Oregon we had religious as well as philosophical as well as medical exemptions, and so and even as a coach I had to put in for a religious exemption, and it was in Oregon they ran those through. So I don't know if it was because I'd already been exempted once that I got exempted twice, and of course then we had to do the weekly nose swab, and I'm like, you know what, I'm not doing that. If you want to fire me, I'm not doing it. You can email me and you can warn me and you can do all those things. But, but to get there, it was really interesting because in that year and a half of working through COVID, there were a lot of governments, Japan, Germany, and other countries that were doing studies and starting to see negative efficacy. And so I would send, when I would see those studies, I would send them to the president of our college. And eventually, it didn't make much of a difference. In the end, I'd get an email back that said, "Well, thank you. We'll take this under advisement."
That was a smart approach, Ken, because there's always two different conversations when we're talking about vaccines. There's efficacy, and there's harms, right? It's like, does it work or does it hurt you? Cost versus benefit. And the only thing they know how to talk about if you're pro-vaccine are the benefits. And so the only thing that could have swayed them is a lack of efficacy. And as you said, can you define negative efficacy for our audience?
Efficacy is when the shot does benefit, when the shot benefits you from getting. Negative efficacy is you're more likely to get, in this case, COVID, because you've had more shots. It works against you.
Right. So you showed them published papers and governments coming out and saying that this shot now we know it has negative efficacy, and that should have persuaded them. But what was the brick wall you were running up against? Do you think there was COVID cash from the CARES Act influencing what they were doing, or is it something else?
Yeah, I don't, I could never really figure that out. I think there was a lot of pressure, and I think that our president at the time pushed back against that and delayed it as long as she possibly could. And eventually, I don't know if money at the end was the motive or just the pressure, but I was surprised at how long she was able to delay that. The other thing I did too was I sent an email because by that time I had become department chair of the social sciences department, and I sent an email. And one of the things I asked was, if you require for employment a shot and something happens to an employee, what are we as an institution responsible for or willing to do for that person? And of course, it was crickets in response. So again, thank you for sharing. We'll take that under advisement. So.
Wow. So you think they, of course, knew about the liability shield. So it was just kind of like, whoops, Butterfingers, sorry, somebody got injured, but it was for the greater good. So that's just how it
Yeah,
goes.
so they were protected. So I think the other thing after the dust had settled and everything kind of started to return back to normal, one of the things I asked for was, what one of the things we do, which is very common, is when we have a project or a policy and we've completed that, we close the loop by reviewing how did our policies work, what worked well, what didn't work well. And I thought, hey, that'd be a great strategy to bring a little light and review of, man, did we mess this up? What? And I offered to sit, on that committee, and of course that never happened. But it was worth a try.
So not only did they not form the committee like any good business would do, and as an MBA, you know that a postmortem is really important. They didn't invite you to be on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course, they wouldn't want you on it, right?
No, but I volunteered. I told them I'd be on it if they wanted me. Yeah.
Before we close out, I just want to know from you, Ken, what did you learn from this whole COVID debacle and the overreach by governments and people's reactions? And give us some insights from the sociology world that you're so familiar with, because I think people are still struggling to understand what happened.
Yeah, I think when we went into that press conference with Senator Johnson, I think that we believed that if the world knew and heard our stories, that it would change everything. And the only reason that it hadn't changed at that time by June of 21 was because nobody had stepped forward with a story in a very public space, an official public space. And we thought, hey, we'll just tell the truth and it'll change. And so, it was real funny too. It's interesting that one of the early mantras we had at that early time, and I told him, I said, you're going to have to do a lot more squeaking, to get the oil. As you know, you got to squeak and get the oil, get a reaction. I said, but the more I'm in this, the more government is such a big machine that we're not going to have to be a squeaky bike tire. We're going to have to threaten to steal the bike, and that kind of became our mantra. But even to that degree, I think we had no idea how big our government is, and how hard it is to break through. Kudos to Robert Kennedy Jr., the Secretary of HHS. I know he gets some criticism by some people for not doing enough. I'll tell you what, he is doing an amazing job of playing 3D chess against other people that are pretty darn good at 3D chess too. And it's really kind of funny. Speaking of the Secretary Kennedy, early on, he caught wind of what we were doing, and he asked me to do an interview for Children's Health Defense. And within our group, these people were injured, and they were saying, "Don't do it. It's going to bring too much." And I'm like, "I'm doing," and it was not I know, and I was even like, I don't know, because you hear things about before you get to know Secretary Kennedy. You hear you look them up on Wikipedia, and they've just just thrown all kinds of arrows at him, right? And I finally got to the place where it's like, you know what? There's a really nice man who's really smart and really educated, and he loves, making a difference in society. And he wants to interview me to talk about my wife and you and all the things I'm doing it.
Good for you. And help me clarify, because I was on the inside at Children's Health Defense, but people didn't want to be quote unquote tainted with this anti-vax Children's Health Defense group, even though they were vaccine injured. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, early on, right? Early on. And of course, these were warriors, right? And I think they were also trying to be wise and smart, from their vantage point of how to navigate this space to be heard and seen and believed without borrowing extra trouble that might take. So it was and of course, we had different ideas of where that line was. And for me, I'm like, you know what? I know we're in this. I know I'm doing the website with y'all, but you know what? I will do it separate. I'll do it as me, doing an interview, telling the truth. And then shortly after that, I did a sports podcast and just told my story of my wife's story, just the facts. And it was within 24 hours, it was shut down by YouTube. So again, censorship, right? Which we're I think we're still dealing with that to a degree out there.
And why can't vaccine injured people exist? Why can't our voices be heard?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like, hey, we're okay with hey, if you eat a peanut, you might have a reaction, a peanut, but we won't believe that injecting material into our body that some people won't react to that. It's yeah, and man, when after the press conference on it, we opened up the website to emails, and I think I was answering about 80 to 100 emails a day. It was really interesting to hear the comments of thank you so much, and we were working to place people that were responding also that were vaccine injured, helping them to find Facebook groups to get community, to get answers, to be believed, to try to find solutions. But also there were some people that were, like I said earlier in the interview, oh, you're paying, those are paid actors and actresses on your video. And then there were some people that said, well, it's about time you got into this space. I've been fighting this battle for decades. To which, my response, because I was trying to respond to everybody, my response was, you know what, you're right. We are late into this game. We are late into the knowledge of what's been going on for decades. And thank you for your work of decades of work and activism and speaking the truth. I think the other thing to your question was being okay speaking the truth, your truth about what happened, and not being ashamed. In Ash's group conformity experiment, when one person stood up, had the courage to stand up, it encouraged other people to stand up as well. That was one of his variations on his study of group conformity, or what we might call today peer pressure. And so the courage to stand up, and in fact, Zimbardo that did the Stanford prison study, he started asking people and talking about, if we can get a person to stand up against the oppressive norms, other people will join. You just have to believe other people will do that. And Desmond, what's the guy's name that wrote?
Oh yeah, Matthias Desmet.
Matthias Desmet. I read his book, the Psychology of Totalitarianism, and loved his mass formation idea, kind of a psychology perspective or a social psychology perspective.
Can you explain that for our viewers?
Yeah, mass formation. So it's how we ended up where we did in COVID, with experts, media, sanctions, where we started policing each other, and this cognitive dissonance and belief of this socially constructed idea. And then we act on that as though it were real, even though there may not be scientific and other support to validate that, but it gets so built up. And so one of the things that I learned, I still try to practice today, and Dr. Desmet is all about this. He says what it's going to take to break that totalitarian ideals of that we're fighting, as this belief in that vaccines are the end all, cure all, be all, and totally safe and effective, is don't be afraid to speak your truth. Don't be afraid, with grace and patience and kindness, just speak your truth about what happened or what you saw happen to other people. And that's a grassroots, bottom up approach to challenging the misinformation that's out there.
And you're setting such a great example there. You are one of the umbrellas under which other people can be less afraid to speak up and say their truth. And it's so important, like the cameramen who understood what was going on during that press conference.
And there weren't a lot of men, there were a lot. I think the heart was a lot of young men, the heart um, issues that because of the COVID shot, but the neurological, a lot of women. And I was like, where are all the guys? Where are all the husbands? Where are all the fathers? And a lot of the ladies would say, thank you so much. I'm like, how can you not? When you see this, how can you not speak out?
Well, there you go. That's the big football that you're carrying now. That's it. One last big question for you. COVID could be three things. Was it about a virus? Was it about finances and making money for the pharmaceutical companies? Or was there a bigger agenda, do you think, to harm and reduce the population? Where do you fall in that continuum?
Yeah, I think I'm open to any of those and probably a little bit of all of those. I think the biggest driver, in my opinion, is the capture of the medical block, the pharmaceutical and medical industrial complex, and the capturing of that. And Eisenhower, famously warned us. Most people think about the capture of the military industrial complex, but he gave other warnings that other areas were going to try to be captured by government and private interest for money and power and status. And so, yeah, I don't know about the population. I'm still up in the air on that. I don't know. Where are you on that, by the way?
Where am I? Well, I think that it's so well known that these shots do have deadly consequences in so many people, and they're doing nothing to really stop it. I do think that that's part of it. So I'm a little bit of a conspiracy theorist. But you know what I wanted to say, because you're a football player? I wanted to say that wouldn't you think of like every football huddle as a conspiracy because it's one team conspiring against another team? Doesn't that meet the definition of a
Yes.
conspiracy?
Absolutely. Well, and I love good conspiracy theories. So I'm not ruling any of that out at all. I mean, I think we need to take hard looks at that and be open to, and you do hear, people, when people say things with their own mouths and you hear it or you see, what's written down, but you see it on video, it's like, that's what they're saying. So when they're saying, hey, we have a population problem and we're also pushing and responsible for this gain of function. I mean, I think that's the other thing that absolutely blows my mind is how we didn't how we didn't see and how we can't still believe. Yeah, it was a lab leak from a gain of function, and we were involved in that, and we still have given passes to the people that we should be locking up.
Exactly. Hopefully, there's going to be some justice for Peter Daszak. Isn't that his name? And Fauci, Deborah Birx, and all the other characters who were involved in that gain of function research. And we were totally collaborating and doing that illegally behind the scenes. So, Ken, is there anything else you want our audience in California to know? We've got a very bad situation here in California. We have a very sorry state of medical freedom where children have to get more than 30 doses of 10 vaccines to go to school. There's no medical exemptions that actually work. The public health department overturns all of them. Do you have any words of encouragement or insight on that?
Yeah, I would say, and kind of echo what I said earlier, that we have to not be afraid to speak our truth and to be okay maybe going against what we believe to be going against the status quo. I think you'd be surprised at how many people would be willing to listen and go, oh yeah, you know what? I believe that. Yeah, I'm with you on that. But it's like, let's get that in the public. And I will tell you that it is a bit nerve wracking, when you're thinking about taking those first few arrows. But like I said earlier, it's like, is that it? That's all you got? It's like, that's nothing. And, I've talked, you and I both, we've talked to different people that have lost, and you and I have both lost some friends. But man, the friends you make, the new friends you make is like, oh, it's gold. So I'd say speak your truth, as Dr. Matthias Desmond talks about, and that's going to break down the power at the state level of shackling us into a system and not valuing our natural rights and our freedoms.
Thank you, Ken Ruettgers. Dr. Ken Ruettgers, Coach Ruettgers, thank you so much for everything you're doing. And tell the audience where they can find you.
They can find John and I on our podcast, on Spotify, on Apple Podcast, or on video at The Ultimate Assist, which is, of course, after John's, kind of record of NBA record of assists, and I don't think those will ever be broken. Right? He is one of the goats of basketball for sure.
And you're one of the goats of football for sure.
No, I was just a role player, offensive lineman. Yeah. But thanks, Alex. Great to be here with you. Thank you for all that you're doing, and let us know if we can do anything for you.
Thank you. Well, you got to quit it with the false modesty. This is an incredible interview, and I'm sure people are going to be really excited to hear what you have to say and all your insights from what you've lived through, everything you've done, and the sociology perspective. It's gold. Thank you, Dr. Ken Ruettgers. We are so happy to have as our prime sponsor, Mish International, Northern California's acclaimed specialists in rare coins and gold and silver investments. Our friend and supporter, Robert Mish, is the same principal that started the company back in 1963, and he's still there every day with 63 years of experience. He has integrity, reliability, and fair pricing, whether you're buying or selling. When you have business to do with precious metals, you'll always be treated well at Mish International. Call 650-324-9110 and tell Robert that Alex sent you.